not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Also the founder and CEO and principal broker at Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Morgan Hill, California. Ready to help you with whatever real estate needs you might have in the Silicon Valley area. We have some interesting things to chat about today, folks. For those of you who don't know, and it would be so much smarter of me to time these better. Last weekend was this month's Coffee and Real Estate live event. I'm going to take a sip of coffee in commemoration of that. For those of you who don't know, this is something I do on the third Saturday of every month on Facebook Live, where we sit around for at least an hour. I'm willing to go longer depending on whether or not I'm getting questions or not. And we'll cover some things. I usually have a brief menu of items for us to discuss in case there aren't any questions. I've been getting, a lot of good viewership, but not a lot of people asking questions. So I know I have some listeners out there that are avid askers of questions because you email me frequently and leave me voicemail messages. So please feel free to show up to that. If you would like to find it, you can head on over to Facebook, do a search for Whitelaw Real Estate, and there's a live tab right there. So you can see past shows and participate in the future. I'm trying to bridge the gap so we can have a live conversation about interesting real estate things. Now, the goal of that show does primarily orbit local stuff. So when I'm going to be talking about Morgan Hill data. I'm going to talk about Silicon Valley data. But it's also about opportunities, right? And opportunities are everywhere, not necessarily just here. So if you have questions about different parts of the country, if I have any valuable information to offer just right off the top of my head, I'll absolutely offer that up. If not, right there live, we could walk through what I would do if I was someone who was interested in a long distance investment opportunity from my office at my computer. What would be the first things I do? Now, I've done videos on this before. If you want to check out what I have done on YouTube, you can just search on Rebel Broker on YouTube. And I know it's been a few years, so maybe it's time for an update because I know, for a while there, Trulia was my go-to, and now Realtor.com is my go-to because for me, it's all about features. I want to go to one place and I want to get all the data I want so that I can start drilling down into more detail on properties I'm interested in. I'm also going to let you folks know that I've been invited to, and I've actually, again, something else might have been good to tell you about this before it happened. But I was invited to a real estate masterminds event a few months back, participated in it, never personally promoted it, but I suppose I will. And have another one coming this week. So I will include a link to that in the description of this particular this particular podcast. And it's from the Crowd Create team. So if you go to crowdcreate.us, or maybe it's even com. Is it com? Crowdcreate.com will probably work too. But in any event, you can find it there. And I was in, by the time you hear this, I will have probably been in two of them, the most recent two. So I was at least good enough to get invited back. So I suppose that's encouraging. All right, so let's jump in. We're already 5 minutes in, and all I've been doing is just self-promotion. Shocking. Let's jump in. The first thing I want to cover here, and we've got and some of this was discussed on Saturday, but this is an opportunity to be a little bit more focused and maybe give a little bit more information on it. An article I came across from the National Association of Realtors was talking about how the FHFA extends relaxed pandemic lending standards. Now, when I tweeted this out, I tweeted that you should equate the word relaxed with the word subprime. And I had some people get mad at me. Surprise, surprise. And all of these people were real estate people. No real people, right? We all know the difference. More coffee, please. And I would like to go through this article because it is absolutely, if not the same thing, it is subprime adjacent, if anything at the least, right? So again, from the National Association of Realtors, where anything that facilitates larger traffic and sales in real estate is a good thing. Federal Housing Finance Agency announced it will, and remember, when we're talking about FHFA, we're talking about Fannie and Freddie, right? Why do we care about Fannie and Freddie? Well, because their fingers are in the loan industry to a point where when a bank underwrites a loan, they're writing it to fit in with all the Fannie Freddie stuff so that they can sell it on the secondary market, right? If they don't underwrite it in a certain way, they can't sell it. And why do they sell it? Because it has all upside and no downside. As long as they have followed the rules that have been set out by these people, they don't own the risk of the loan anymore. You do as a taxpayer, because these are all government-sponsored agencies, government-sponsored entities. Now, there have been interesting rumbles that the government wanted to spin these off now as totally private things, which I think would be awesome. Government involvement in almost anything usually doesn't spell good things. However, with the change in administration, I don't think that'll happen at this point. The government will want to keep its fingers in this as a point of being able to influence financial markets, right, including the real estate market. All right, so here we go. The relaxed lending and this is where we're going to get into the good stuff here. The relaxed lending and appraisal standards for mortgage financing giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were first put into place by the FHFA in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020. They allow for alternative verifications of employment and appraisals. Now, what does that line sound like to you? Does anyone remember the term stated income? How long do I need to wait for you to churn that one through your brain? Because for those of you who've been listening to me for a while, you know exactly what that is. That was one of the amazing building blocks that fed us subprime loans. Stated income. Now, some people are probably going to argue that that's not a bad thing necessarily, right? That we are not in a position where this equals exactly that, and maybe not. I sure have talked to some interesting folks in the financing world that sure do seem to think that's what's happening here. And given what they do every day, I'm prone to believe them. So let's look into this a little bit more. The changes are to ensure continued support for borrowers during the COVID-19 national emergency. FHFA will continue to monitor the coronavirus situation and update policies as needed. Lenders initially reported struggles of being able to obtain appraisals, and that was fine. And, in terms of the appraisal part, I'm not sure how much of a part this plays. For those of you not in the real estate world, you may not know that for a lot of these loans, it was okay to do drive-up appraisals. In other words, literally the appraiser drives by the house, doesn't go inside, takes a look, takes a picture, moves on, just so that they could move the process along. Also, lenders reported struggling with being able to verify borrowers' employment. Lenders reported struggling with being able to verify borrowers' employment. In response, now remember, the reason I'm repeating that twice is because that is almost word for word criteria that led to things like stated income and subprime loans, right? Because you can't verify their income. They use the word employment, but the real word we should be looking here for is income. While a bank cares if you're employed, they don't care if you're employed per se, right? The employment part of it is just the source for the well, right? What they want is to know how much you make per month, right? They don't really care what you do for a living. They don't care if you're a farmer or a gymnast gymnastics coach or whatever. No one cares. I don't know where gymnastics coach came from. No idea. I can't figure out why that would have popped into my head. But anyway, you get my point. They don't. The employment is a side thing. It's caring adjacent. Maybe that'll be our theme for today. We're talking about things that are adjacent to other things. And let me just say, I feel so liberated that my video camera is not on. I feel like when I'm talking like this, I feel like I must look like an idiot. So I think that's why I'm self-conscious about it, right? Anyway, going old school feels better. In any event, so far so bad, right? We are being reminded of things that did not end well, right? Okay. In a release, the FHFA said the extension applies to allowing alternative methods for documenting income and verifying employment before a loan closes. The appraisals part isn't as sexy. Alternative appraisals on purchase and rate term refinance loans and expanding the use of power of attorney to assist with loan closings. None of that's really sexy. And it ends with the FHFA has issued a request for public input on policies and practices regarding the home appraisal process as it weighs a series of proposals moving forward. Now, one of the things that's particularly concerning to me is whenever you're talking about things like this and an article comes out that's particularly light on details, I'm always a little bit concerned. When you sort of just make these sweeping statements, right, that we are streamlining or easing or simplifying lending standards, that's a scary thing. And let's extrapolate from that, right? Why did this cause such a problem last time? And let's see if we can draw any parallels between then and now. Then we had huge ramp up in home prices, right? We had a ridiculous ramp up from 2003 to 2007, a ridiculous ramp up in home prices, right? Do we have that now? Yeah, we do. During that time frame, we facilitated pushing far more loans out the door with less scrutiny. Did that happen last time? Yeah. It sure did. It's happening this time too. This is just another brick in that wall, though. For those of you who've been listening to me for a while, you know that we've already been doing this. We've been priming this pump for, at this point, 7 years since the downturn. And here's the problem. If we come to the conclusion that what we're seeing right now is an overvaluation of real estate, which is really the conclusion you have to come to about last time, right? If you conclude it's an overvaluation, then what we are doing is facilitating the purchase of properties in a scenario where the buyers cannot sustain that debt in a downturn, right? That's the nature of relaxed lending standards. Relaxed lending standards doesn't mean that, the difference isn't you're all sitting on a couch sipping a margarita and there's a beautiful sunset as you sign your loan papers. That's not a relaxed lending standard. A relaxed lending standard is specifically relaxed standards. The standards are relaxed. The requirements are relaxed. The qualifications are relaxed. That's what all of that equals. So whether you believe that what I've talked about in past shows relating to how we've simply degraded what a credit rating actually means, and I'm not going to get into if I go into that, we'll be talking for an hour, and I don't want to subject you guys to that. Happy to recover it if someone out there is really interested in, or I'd refer you to past shows I've done on this subject. But there is a huge push, and they say it out loud. There is a huge push to put out more money. There was a article from the Fool, the Motley Fool, fool.com. In market machinations, the likes of which haven't been seen since the Great Recession, federal agencies on Monday, now this is back from March of 2020, so this is a while ago. This is when they first announced the mortgage underwriting standards were going to be relaxed. Standards and committed to siphoning up unlimited amounts of related securities to inject liquidity into a wavering home buying industry. Fannie and Freddie Mac, a pair of government-sponsored entities who operate together under the FHFA, will now allow the drive-by, same thing, drive-by appraisals. And then they'll even, under certain circumstances, no appraisers actually having to go into the home at all. Which is now difficult to impossible in some areas, yada, yada, yada. So, this is the thing that concerns me here is piles and piles of money, being thrown at this. But remember what we've talked about before. Banks only make money when money moves, right? And you as a buyer is one of the people who makes money move. So they have a vested, and the government is really too cozy, I think, in this process, is too invested in this process, too involved in this process, to its own detriment. For those of you who lived through the last downturn, and I'm assuming anyone listening to this did, unless I have extremely young listeners that I doubt, there is nothing worse than seeing someone buy a home and then have a scenario arise where they are completely upside down. They owe far more than the home is worth, and they are saddled with this debt, or they lose their job and can't make the payment. And there's an awful lot of folks who live paycheck to paycheck. So we've got several things. We have this huge amount of debt that's being assumed by people who are probably not in a great position to weather any kind of a bad situation. Not even a collapse, right? Just any kind of a problem. And a lot of these folks are not in a position to be able to withstand it. And the system is geared towards getting these folks into a property, getting them into the debt for the property. So that's a concern for me. I feel like we're setting the same stage that we set last time, which is not something that we should be happy about or encouraging. So with that stage having been set, let's talk a little bit about what might be coming down the pike, right? We've set a stage, right? We have ridiculously rising home prices that are, and we can decide whether or not this is a quote unquote artificial boost, right? The boost we are getting is because of low inventory. That is it. So you need to decide for yourself, do we have low inventory for actual market reasons or not? And the reason we have low inventory numbers, there's two reasons. One, home manufacturers are not building enough homes, at least not enough homes that folks can afford. And we can also have a discussion about the reason why that is, which is it costs too much, right? The amount of costs involved in building a home were ramped up in the mid-2000s because the government wanted to be able to cash in on the boom in real estate, and then they never got rid of that stuff when everything crashed, right? So there are still ridiculous fees involved. If we just went back to the level of fees put on builders that existed in the year 2000, including permit stuff, all that kind of stuff, we'd be in a far better place. It would make far more financial sense to build average-priced homes. It used to be a new home construction was about 10% more than existing homes. Now that's up at that's like 20% more. So it's kind of ridiculous. The point I'm making here is the flip side of that, which is folks who want to sell their home is being artificially impacted by the coronavirus. So you can kind of try to decide if that makes a difference to you. Obviously, there's no law against putting your home on the market with corona floating around, but is the response the thing? Is the way we've responded to the coronavirus feeding it more? So and it really doesn't matter whether we decide if it's a real influence or not a real influence, right? Or an artificial influence. It is a thing. Whatever tag we put on it, it's an actual influence in the marketplace, and it's preventing sellers from listing their home. So what happens when that goes away? Do we see a huge rush of listings? If there were folks who were delaying it simply because they were concerned for their health and not having folks potentially with COVID coming through their home, to some degree that's likely to happen, right? If at some point we can say it is over, and folks are confident with that, then that would indicate an increase in the folks who are listing their homes. The age groups of folks who should be listing their homes and selling them right now just aren't doing it, right? These are folks who are in the higher risk categories who tend to be older citizens, older Americans, who are really worried that someone's going to drop COVID someone in their house, and then they're going to be in trouble. All right, so that's the stage that's set. The parameter that needs to change in order for inventory to change looks to be COVID. So what else? What else is on the horizon? Now I'm going to go ahead. It's tinfoil hat time. I know I haven't asked for folks to break out their tinfoil hats in a long time on the show. We are with Zero Hedge, who and they skirt the line between frequently being right, but also being like a little over the edge on the really loony side. So keep that in mind. I much prefer their articles where they're just sharing facts and then they draw some conclusions, and then we can all draw our own conclusions based on the same facts, right? Now, this is January 18th. Monday, January 18th is when this particular article came out. So super recent, at least in comparison to in relation to the date this is being recorded. This week, we learned that another 965,000 Americans filed new claims for unemployment benefits during the previous week. Quote, the number of people seeking unemployment aid soared last week to 965,000, the most since late August, and evidence that this resurgent virus has caused a spike in layoffs. And you can have a conversation about what that is, right, in terms of layoffs. I would think it's logical to expect more and more layoffs to come as this goes on longer, right? It's about companies trying to survive it, and then at some point they got to go, all right, we're done. And the number of businesses that hit that wall would increase over time, right? As it gets later and later and later, it just happens. So I'm not sure that anything about a resurgence is the key thing, simply that it's still going on and that a whole lot of places are reamping up the restrictions for folks. So just something to keep in mind. Again, a distinction without really a difference. The reality is 965,000 unemployed. The latest figures for jobless claims issued Thursday by the Labor Department, that's Thursday last week, remain at levels never seen until the virus struck. Before the pandemic, weekly applications typically numbered around 225,000. Last spring, after nationwide shutdowns took effect, applications for jobless benefits spiked to nearly 7 million, 10 times the previous record high after declining over the summer. Weekly claims have been struck above 700,000 since September. Now, so let's just take that as a reality number. How fast does that recover as soon as COVID goes away or as soon as the restrictions go away? Does it happen like that? Can you hear that snap? Or does it not? I would argue it does not. A whole lot of things have to happen for people to be hiring people, right? A, customers have to come back, and then B, companies that have gone away. I just took a drive through all the various commercial spaces here in my local town and in Gilroy, and I am shocked at the number of now vacant businesses that were once thriving and had been for decades. Went down and got some sushi in Gilroy the other day. This awesome faux soup place that was right next door to the sushi joint, gone. Empty. Huge square footage, by the way. They used to do an amazing business. And they're gone. Driving through Morgan Hill. Businesses going out of business. So we're not seeing and remember, think what needs to happen in order for businesses to reopen, if they do, or for any business to feel confident enough to reopen. So obviously my anecdotal experience is super local, but I'm thinking that's true anywhere where these restrictions have been super strong. And in a market like California, where we've had the most strict stuff going on, I think there's a lot to be potentially worried about there. You're not going to see a huge jobs recovery. So what does that equal? Does that equal we continue to relax lending standards? Because remember, mobile money is what makes banks money. So you got to keep it mobile. So the only way to make sure more money is being used is if you, in a scenario where there's fewer and fewer qualified buyers, is to cater to less qualified buyers, which isn't helping unqualified buyers. It's putting them in a scenario where they potentially are going to get hosed. All right. Let's see. 2020 was particularly a tough year for low-paid workers. Unemployment for the lowest-paid workers in the U.S. is above 20%, a figure that Federal Reserve Governor Lael Brainerd said underscores the importance of policy help for the economy. The figure indicates how uneven the recovery has been since efforts to control the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in the biggest quarterly GDP drop since the Great Depression. Well, that's a duh, right? any job that caters to specifically dealing with folks in a retail environment, whether it's restaurants, stores, whatever, those are hourly workers who make minimum wage because those are not high skill jobs. You can make an argument that to be a really good waiter or waitress, you're going to make a little bit more, right? Because you're really good at that job and you're going to get paid more. But the person who's ringing you up at Best Buy, the person who's ringing you up for that burger or whatever else, all the folks who are simply doing those jobs are going to go because there's nobody coming in, right, under a COVID restricted world. Okay. And this is not just something that's happened in the past. Obviously, we're seeing with these unemployment numbers, things are not good. Another good example is Dropbox. You should be familiar with Dropbox, right? It's one of those cloud storage services, cutting its global workforce by 11%. That's what the company said in an 8K filing released Wednesday. The company's stock was down more than 4.5% in late morning trading. The move will affect 315 people who will be notified by the end of the business day. The Biden administration has already announced that day one is to cancel the pipeline from Canada, right? That was supposed to go through to Nebraska, I believe. Thousands and thousands of jobs will be lost over that. And, I get that there's an environmentalist concern. I remember reading up on the Keystone Pipeline back when it was first proposed, and to my mind, it seemed like a good thing to do. The other methods that are being used to transport oil are less secure or less safe in terms of the environment. I mean, I'm not sure why anyone would look at the way oil moves and is moved and think that a pipeline isn't better than doing it by boat or by vehicle. I mean, it kind of blows the mind, frankly. It's so much less controllable in those other environments. But anyway, American consumers are doing less shopping at Walmart and other corporate behemoths, so we're seeing huge retail outlets being hit. U.S. retail sales just fell for a third month in a row. And Biden has unveiled a $1.9 trillion. I actually have another article about that. $1.9 trillion plan to prop up the economy. Now, remember when we were getting upset about TARP the first time around? That was what, $260 billion? All said, we ended up going, I think, to $1.2 billion. And I was all on board for being upset about that. 1.9 trillion is what he proposes to do when he gets there. That doesn't include all the money that's been spent so far. So clearly over $2 trillion out the door relating to all of this. And he's also calling for a minimum wage of $15 an hour. We've talked about the minimum wage before. Whatever your opinion on it is, the stats are clear. That reduces the number of available jobs. No employer operates in an employment vacuum. If your costs of employing people goes up, you reduce the number of people you employ. It's as simple as that. And imagine how that's going to affect the restaurant industry. How does a restaurant industry recover under that kind of stress? Let's see here. Deficits don't matter is kind of the mantra right now, and I think a lot of you agree with me that is not the case. Let's go ahead and jump in to the Biden thing. I had that as my next article. Now, this is from Realty Biz, where the headline is Biden to provide $25 billion in rental assistance, when the real headline is announced a stimulus plan worth $1.9 trillion that included several housing-related proposals. And don't forget, we're also talking about the government mandating that you can't evict people, which continues to be kind of nuts. The proposals would extend the moratorium on evictions and foreclosures until September 30th, provide an additional $25 million in rental assistance to help landlords, plus $5 billion for homelessness protection. Quote, while the $25 billion allocated by Congress was an important down payment on the back rent accrued during the crisis, it is insufficient to meet the scale of the need, Biden's team said in a statement regarding the stimulus package. The proposal was warmly welcomed by the National Association of Realtors. For those of you who've been listening to a while, you can insert any of my usual rants about my opinion on the National Association of Realtors and issues like this, so I will skip it, which has been advocating for increased rental assistance since the first round of pandemic relief, called the CARES Act, which passed in March 2020. The National Association of Realtors has said that extending moratoriums on evictions without rental assistance would hurt landlords that can't cover their own costs. That is absolutely true. I simply don't like the idea of delegating the authority to do that to the government. The bottom line here is that given past performance, I am not inclined to give bureaucrats more control over anything. I realize that there are folks who disagree with that more government control is seen as better and a better way to even the playing field. The reality is that if someone is renting a home from a private citizen and cannot pay their rent, that's an agreement they both entered into, and you can't expect the landlord to simply eat that cost. And if the government really wants to delve into that problem, they shouldn't get to tell the homeowner what they do with the home. The landlord should not be at the mercy of the government in terms of continuing to house someone who can't pay the rent. If the government wants to step in, let me refer you to any of the closed military bases here in California that have tons of barracks around that are perfectly suitable to house folks. If that's really what you want to do, then do that. Get those things back up to snuff, make sure the insulation is good, get the heating going, and house people there who are in a situation where they can't live in their own place. And I still would have issues with that. But you don't get to delegate this kind of stuff to a homeowner. The idea, and that's, and some of you know that I majored in history and business in college, graduated with a degree in history and abandoned the business degree my junior year. But always been a fan of history, always been a fan of the things that make our country strong. And aside from the typical freedoms that are laid out by the Bill of Rights, there's also the rights to property, right? You're supposed to have property rights. So this is sort of a direct attack on that, and I dislike that. If the government, if collectively it's decided the government should be solving this, the solution is not tell landlords what to do with their property. The solution is backfill the gap that you perceive as a thing that you should be involved with. We can have conversations about whether or not they should or shouldn't, but this is not the right way to go, and it puts a multiple of people at risk instead of a smaller subset of people at risk. So there's a lot going on there. What else have we got? I like to try to keep these things under 30 minutes, and that's obviously not happening. Other things we could talk about, I'll hit on real quick. COVID-19 vaccine rollout could lead to higher inventories and lower prices. We kind of already touched on that, and I also touched on it in the live event on Saturday, so you can check that out. I talked about it a little bit more in detail. I actually think I had this article there. The other thing I wanted to hit was the exodus continues. Point 72 is opening new offices in West Palm Beach. Cohen, whose firm oversees $19 billion, is reportedly looking for additional office space in the Sunshine State, where he will open an office in West Palm Beach before the end of June, according to Bloomberg. The firm is also looking at another location in Miami, the report notes. The offices are supposedly popping up to accommodate current and prospective employees who want to move south. And so Steve Cohen can work on his tan. Let's see. The reason I point this out is it shows the exodus from New York. This is not just we're opening up some offices for folks. This is we're moving. In addition, that kind of went in nicely with this is, and I think the smartest politician of the month award, I think, goes to Mayor Suarez, Mayor Francis Suarez of Miami, who basically is looking directly at Silicon Valley in New York and saying, hey, people are just happy here. I'm quoting him now. People are just happy here. At the end of the day, you meet people and they're smiling. In San Francisco, that's not so true. And he is saying, businesses, you want to come and take advantage of the great tax, great weather. You want that Silicon Valley vibe of tropical sunshine and all that other kind of wonderful stuff and surfing and all the other things that go with California. Come to Miami. We've got it, and we're not doing to you what California is doing to you. Let's see. So some of the key points from this article, and this is from CNBC. When somebody on Twitter suggested turning Miami into a tech hub, Mayor Suarez responded with, "How can I help?" And that is why he wins the Politician of the Month award. And it set off a firestorm of activity. The city's weather and low tax business climate are drawing entrepreneurs and investors who are in turn trying to draw others. So there you go, right? And that's one of the awesome, and I don't, soapbox time, but that's one of the things that's supposed to be true about this country, right? Each state is supposed to be its own little political experiment. And I think that's awesome. And the more power we can have states be able to exercise within their own borders without federal intervention, I think is a good thing. People are voting with their feet. I'll leave you with this. We're 5 minutes later than I usually like to go, but I'll leave you with this. I called a local moving company today, not today. When did I call them? Friday last week, with the specific question: if I wanted to move my house out of state, how long would I have to wait? 5 months. They could not get a truck to me for 5 months. And I started Googling around and found a Southern California TV station that did a story on this. Every mover that will move you at anywhere is booked out anywhere from 4 months to a year. They're turning business away. People are done. And I had this moving guy I was talking to. Granted, he was a semi-local guy. He was up in San Jose. Had a quick conversation with him, and I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about your customers. Do they tend to be, are you seeing these tend to be folks at the higher end? Are these folks that live in really you're seeing their houses, right? You know where their neighborhoods are. Who do these people tend to be?" Without a second of hesitation, these are folks. These are higher end folks. These are folks who are living in higher end properties. These are folks who, and I think that makes sense. The folks who are living off of what is in their brain, like programmers and people who can live and work remotely and not have it impact their work per se, are the ones that seem to be going. But even like higher echelon management folks, VPs, these are the folks he's saying are moving. But he's saying he's also seeing while they're the dominant number, he's also seeing an awful lot of simply right in the middle folks who are just done and they want out. So that's interesting. Totally anecdotal, just me talking to a guy on the phone who happens to run a moving business. But I thought that was super interesting. All right, folks. That's all I've got for you today. We're a little bit later than I usually like to be. I like to keep these a little bit more bite-sized these days. I know I used to go on forever, and I still tend to do it if I get into the weeds too much. Now, the goal is always to leave you with more information on the table than I take up in your time. Hope I've achieved that today. If you've got any questions, concerns, ideas, or data to offer, observations you're making about the world of real estate, or stories you'd like to share, feel free to reach out to me. You can go to therebelbroker.com. Or you can go to soldbyrobert.com. I'm trying to migrate everything under one URL, but I was finding people were having trouble finding old shows when I migrated the Rebel Broker to just Sold by Robert. So I reinstated that so you can find stuff more easily on that site. But feel free to reach out. Happy to have a chat with you about whatever you're interested in. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you all next time.